Do you want to start a war by regulating TikTok? Okay, that might be a tad dramatic, but the question of how the United States engages with China is anything but simple. From trade wars to tech scrutiny, the relationship between these two global giants is complex and possibly frightening. We're talking potential flashpoints, economic standoffs, and enough geopolitical tension to make even the most cynical observer raise an eyebrow. One arena where this clash is playing out in a big way, you guessed it, the digital world, specifically apps like TikTok. What started as a platform for viral dance crazes and catchy tunes has become a focal point in a much larger debate about national security, economic influence, and good old-fashioned global power. So buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into the intricacies of United States-China relations. We'll unpack the arguments, explore the historical context, and try to understand just how a seemingly innocuous app became a pawn in a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess. Let's get to it. If we're being honest, the United States taking a hard line on TikTok, Huawei, and even expressing strong opinions on Hong Kong or Taiwan, well, it doesn't exactly scream hands-off approach, does it? From China's perspective, these actions look a lot like meddling in areas they believe they have clear sovereignty, or at the very least, a hefty sphere of influence. Imagine someone poking around in your business, telling you how to run things. You wouldn't be thrilled, right? The thing is, international relations aren't exactly like running a business. There's a lot more at stake than profit margins, and the rules, well, let's just say they're open to interpretation. The United States often argues that its actions are about protecting its interests and upholding a rules-based international order. China, on the other hand, sees it as an attempt to stifle its growth and maintain American hegemony. It's a classic power struggle, but with 21st century technology thrown into the mix. Think about it like this. The United States has long positioned itself as a champion of democracy and free markets, often intervening in other countries' affairs in the name of these values. China, with its own distinct political system and economic model, represents a challenge to that established order. So, when the United States raises concerns about data security or human rights violations, it's not just about TikTok or Huawei, it's about broader anxieties over China's growing influence and what it means for the future of global power. It's about drawing lines in the sand and sending a message. This far, no further. Remember that time when the United States and the Soviet Union were locked in an ideological battle for world domination? Yeah, good times. That was the Cold War, and one of the defining features of United States foreign policy during that era was containment, a strategy aimed at preventing the spread of communism. Now, fast forward to today, and you'll find some striking parallels. While the ideological battleground has shifted from communism to, well, the future of technology and global order, the underlying principle of containment seems to be making a comeback. Scrutinizing Chinese companies like TikTok, restricting technology transfers, even the trade war, all of these can be seen as attempts to limit China's expanding global influence. It's like trying to contain a wildfire, but instead of flames, it's 5G networks and artificial intelligence. But here's the thing about containment. It's a risky strategy. Back in the Cold War, it led to proxy wars, international crises, and a whole lot of mistrust. Trying to box in a rising power like China could have similar unintended consequences. Instead of fostering cooperation and understanding, it risks fueling resentment and pushing China further away from the negotiating table. It's like playing a game of Jenga. Pulling out the wrong block could bring the whole tower crashing down. So while concerns about China's growing influence are understandable, resorting to Cold War era tactics might not be the most effective or safe way to address them. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't work. Remember when the internet was supposed to break down borders and create a truly global village? Yeah, about that. The push for TikTok's United States operations to be sold to an American company reveals a deeper anxiety, the fear of losing economic and technological sovereignty. It's like this. In an increasingly interconnected world, where data flows freely across borders, the lines between national and international are blurring, and for some, that's a scary thought. The United States has long been a champion of free trade and globalization, but the rise of China poses a new kind of challenge. China's economic model, often characterized by state-owned enterprises and a strong hand in directing industrial policy, has allowed it to rapidly close the technological gap with the West. This has led to concerns in the United States about unfair competition, intellectual property theft, and the potential for China to dominate key industries of the future. The push to ensure that TikTok's United States user data is controlled by an American company is just one example of this broader trend. But here's the thing about economic protectionism. It's like building walls in a world that's already figured out how to build bridges. In an era of global supply chains and interconnected economies, trying to isolate yourself from competition is like trying to swim upstream. It's exhausting, and you're not likely to get very far. Moreover, economic protectionism can backfire. It can lead to higher prices for consumers, stifle innovation, and damage relationships with key trading partners. Remember those old maps with swashbuckling explorers claiming territories in the name of their empires? Well, the days of planting flags and claiming land might be over, but the competition for global influence is alive and well. Welcome to the 21st century version of the Great Game. It's not about physical territories anymore, but about controlling the flow of information, technology, and resources. Think of it as a giant game of chess, with the US and China as the two grandmasters, each making strategic moves to outmaneuver the other. TikTok, Huawei, the Belt and Road Initiative, these are just a few of the pawns in this high-stakes game. The US is concerned about China using its technological prowess to project its power and influence around the world. China, on the other hand, sees the US as trying to cling to its fading dominance. It's a classic case of great power competition, but with a modern twist. The battleground has shifted from battlefields to boardrooms, from military bases to cyberspace, and the weapons of choice are no longer tanks and missiles, but data, algorithms, and 5G networks. It's a rivalry that is shaping the world around us, from the apps we use to the infrastructure that connects us. And like any good game, it's full of suspense, intrigue, and the potential for both cooperation and conflict. Hold on a second, let's hit the pause button for a moment. So far, we've mainly looked at things from the US perspective, But what about the other side of the story? What about the critics who argue that U.S. actions smack of hypocrisy and even a new form of imperialism? Think about it. For centuries, Western powers, including the U.S., have intervened in the affairs of other countries, often with disastrous consequences. From colonialism to regime change, the track record isn't exactly stellar. So, when the U.S. criticizes China's human rights record or accuses it of economic coercion, it's met with a healthy dose of skepticism from some corners. They argue that the U.S. is simply trying to hold on to its own power and privilege while denying China the same opportunities for development and influence. It's a perspective that's often overlooked in Western media, but it's crucial for understanding the complexities of the U.S.-China relationship. It's a reminder that history is written by the victors, and that the line between self-interest and genuine concern for others can be blurry. The truth is, there's no easy answer here. The U.S. has a right to protect its interests and promote its values, but it also needs to be mindful of its own history and the potential for double standards. It's a delicate balancing act, and one that requires a nuanced understanding of both sides of the story. Let's address the elephant in the room, or should we say, the dragon. The debate over China is often clouded by fear, suspicion, and outright prejudice. From accusations of espionage to scapegoating for economic woes, anti-China sentiment has become a dangerous undercurrent in global politics. Some argue that the concerns about TikTok are overblown, that it's just another social media app, no different from Facebook or Instagram. They point out that there's no evidence of TikTok sharing user data with the Chinese government, and that the company has taken steps to address privacy concerns. They argue that the real issue isn't data security, but rather a deep-seated fear of China's rise and a desire to maintain American dominance in the tech sector. They see it as a form of technological McCarthyism, where any company or individual with ties to China is branded a threat. And you know what? They might have a point. Throughout history, fear of the other has been used to justify discrimination, violence, and even war. It's crucial to be vigilant against such dangerous narratives and to ensure that our policies are based on facts, not fear. The challenge is to separate legitimate concerns about China's behavior from unfounded prejudice. It's about having a nuanced conversation that acknowledges both the challenges and the opportunities that China presents. Because at the end of the day, demonizing an entire country and its people is not only counterproductive, but it's also morally wrong. So, where do we go from here? The U.S.-China relationship is complex, multifaceted, and constantly evolving. There are no easy answers, no magic solutions, but one thing is clear: we can't afford to let fear and mistrust guide our actions. History has shown us time and again that mistrust and competition, when left unchecked, can lead to conflict. Could today's tech wars be tomorrow's battlegrounds? It's a sobering thought, and one that should give us all pause. We need to find a way to coexist, to compete peacefully, and to cooperate on the global challenges that affect us all. It won't be easy, but the alternative, a world divided by suspicion and hostility, is simply too dangerous to contemplate. History has shown us that mistrust and competition can lead to conflict. Could today's tech wars be tomorrow's battlegrounds? Please subscribe and have a good day.